In this exercise, we are going to do the very simple loft, which is in your book actually on page 159. And it is a very simple transition between the square and the circular cross section. With the square, we will start by 80 by 80 square on a top plane, and then on a plane which is offsetted by 60 millimeters from the top, we will make circle of diameter 50, and we are going to make a loft, essentially transition of square to circle, something like what you can see in air conditioning. Loft is the most generic creature of all of the creatures that lives in a SolidWorks part modeling, I mean from all of the features, because the loft is defined by cross sections and the guide curves. Cross sections are exactly what their name says. They are the, like if you slice the object at a certain plane, so whatever is the cross section of the object. And the guide curve tell us how does that whole piece bulge or how the material flow from one section to another. So let's see how it works on the example of this lofted base. So I'm in a millimeters mode, so I'm going to sketch on the top plane centered rectangle, and I'm going to specify the size of this rectangle to be an 80. And I'm going to say this line and this line and the line are equal in length, which fully constrain my rectangle. I'm going to create a new, so this will be my cross section 1. Now for a cross section 2, I'm going to insert reference geometry, which will be a plane. And that plane will be offsetted from the top plane. And that plane will be offsetted for a 60 millimeters. And I'm going to sketch on that plane, on that new plane, circle, which will be in a coordinate origin of the diameter 50. That fully constrain the sketch. And if I look straight to it, so going to now make sure that my loft will go from one to another circle. So here are my two stations which defines, and I can make this plane invisible. So those two stations define my object. Now how I can pull the object which will unify those two stations? It will be with a feature which is called loft. So if I click on a feature, here is a lofted boss base option. Left click on a lofted boss base. It asks us for a profiles, which are the same as a cross sections, and I'm going to choose, let's say, the lower left point of the square, and I'm going to choose some point which is kind of like just linear to it on the top of the, on my circle. And look what has happened now. What happened is that the computer have drawn transition, and because there is no guide curve, the guide curve will be a straight line from the point where I place the objects to the point where I actually, from the point where I pick the objects. Can adjust that little curve, but however, as you can see, it will make me the, will make this piece to be an irregular. So here is the center piece. Click OK, and here is my loft. So essentially, if I look now, this cross section goes from the square to a circle, and it is continuously changed. If I click on a section view, and if I choose this plane, look what happened as I start pulling it out. So essentially, it gradually transits from the square to a circle. This is a trivial example with only two profiles or two cross sections. Loft can have arbitrarily many cross sections, and it can also have a guide curves. In the next example, we will see the use of the guide curve. In this case, when there is no guide curve, it assumes the straight line between the pick points. when there is a guide curve and the center line, we can actually have this loft bulging. For example, we can have a guide curve like this. And that's what we are going to implement now. So I'm going to delete this loft. To make the guide curve, I will go on a sketch on the front plane. I will place a sketch on the front plane. And I'm going to make, let's say, like an arc. So I want this to be bulged. And to bulge like this. And as you can see, this one actually defines our one guide curve. Now, what I can do, I can actually create this guide curve in a second sketch. Can create another guide curve here, but let's see if I just use the one guide curve, how it will do it. Lofted boss base, profiles 1 and 2, and look, it immediately picked this up as a guide curve. However, what happened? That guide curve was also implemented. The domain of the implementation of the guide curve was across entire object. So you can see it has the same curvature from here and here. So the one is convex, one is concave. If we want to change that, what we will do? We will create two guide curves. So, and then if we want to have the same curvature on the other ends, we can make it 4 guide curves. Yeah, so let's see that. So let's see how can we do that thing. So we have the guide curve. Each guide curve needs to be in a separate sketch. So I'm going to start another sketch on the front plane in this case. And I may make a construction line as a vertical center line. And I'm going to use the mirror entities option. Pardon, first I'm going to convert this item to bring my guide curve into my current sketch. And now I'm going to use the mirror entities. And I will clear the copies. So entity to mirror is this one. And mirror about is this line. Mirror about is my center line. And now if I choose this one and this, I can make the Pierce relationship, as well as it can be either a coincidental or Pierce. Whenever you are intersecting different objects in space, it should really be a Pierce relationship. Now I have these two guide curves. Now let's see how it will look like. If I go to the feature, lofted boss space, again I will choose my two. And if I get another guide curve, from here, look what happened. Now I have a two guide curve and it is bulbing on these sides. So I have a control of the feature. However, what is happening on the sides? Nothing, because there is no guide curve. So I can make another guide curves. You see, because here there is no guide curve, it's just a straight line. Versus in a front plane, we have a guide curve and we have that nice bulbing. Now, if I go and if I change, let's say that I want to make on a right plane another guide curve and I want it to be in the opposite direction different. I want it maybe to be a concave, like inner. So let me make a sketch here. And before I actually edit that sketch, I'm going to delete my loft or roll it back, because I will need my other guide curve too. Yeah, this guide curve is that's an artifact. Sketch 3 and sketch 4 are all what we have. Okay, I'm going to put a sketch on the right plane. I'm going to look straight to it. And you see, this was my artificial guide curve, which was somehow still kept there as an artifact. However, I'm now going to make another guide curve. And let's say that my guide curve for this will be something different. Let me use the spline. And let's say that I want it to be like, and I can change the curvature of the spline, move the point and make it. Let's say I want this guide curve to be like this. Now I can insert another sketch. Now what I can do, I can insert another sketch. And the plane will be again the right plane. And I'm going to center line. No, we are not selected the plane, so let me choose the right plane. And now what I can do, insert line for construction. And I'm going to make another center line for that sketch. And now I'm going to mirror my previously created. However, I first need to convert it. So I will convert that entity. Then I'm going to mirror it without copying. Entity to mirror is my curve. And mirror about my center line. And there it is. And I'm going to make that these two have pierce relationships, because the guide curve always need to pierce or be coincident with a cross section. Otherwise it cannot guide, because it guides from a cross section to a cross section. So I kind of make those two. And now what I can do, I can make a loft which will be much more detailed. Features. I go to the loft. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to choose the top and bottom. And then I'm going to choose the guide curves. Guide curve 1, guide curve 2, guide curve 3, and guide curve 4. And look now how much feature control I have. I have those sides left and right being concave, and I have the top and bottom being convex. So I was able to create this fairly complex geometry just from a circle and a square in reality. So, and by defining, using a guide curve, how those two progress, how the change of a one cross section progress to another cross section. Okay, now it's your assignment just to complete the first elementary loft. So let's make those square and the circle, and let's make a loft, and then you can play with the arbitrarily guide curve. And just to see what we have done here, look now these transitions, how actually they look like as we go from the square to a circle with the help of those guide curves. Look how the transition actually changed. Quite different than what was the initial loft.